Good evening to everyone, and welcome to the Royal Missionary Baptist Church Wellness on Wednesday ministry. We're delighted to be together once again, and we're grateful for the opportunity to share on this particular topic tonight, caring for the caregiver. We know that there are many in our community, not only within our church walls, but many who are listening in from around the city, around our community, and certainly around the state as well, who are impacted by having to care, wanting to care for those in their households and those they are reaching out. Sometimes we're caring for others from a distance. And it's good to know that there are resources, there are skilled persons with expertise who can assist us as we care for our loved ones and provide the best opportunities that they will be able to flourish and we will be able to flourish as caregivers. So tonight is all about finding out about how we can take care of ourselves as we take care of those whom we love. So we welcome you tonight on behalf of our pastor, Pastor Isaac J. Holt Jr., and the chairperson of our ministry, Sister Cleo Brown. So thank you for joining us tonight. We want to remind you that there will be opportunities for you to share your questions or your comments in the chat function. We will save room, save time for that toward the end of our discussion tonight, because even as we have this discussion and hear from our experts, there may be some questions that are triggered that you can share in that chat function. So please feel free to do so, and we will get to those toward the end of our time tonight. So again, we welcome you and we certainly thank you as we gather together. So why don't we begin our time in prayer? We invite anyone who would like to join in that moment to just please bow your heads as I lead us in prayer. So eternal God, we thank you as we gather together and as we seek ways that we can care for others. We understand that we have limitations ourselves. So thank you for the resources. Thank you for the experts in our community that we'll be able to know more, to learn more about how we can take care of ourselves as you care for us and as we care for others. So bless this time tonight and thank you for those who've gathered. We thank you for all these things. In Christ's name we pray. Amen. Well, again, we're delighted to have you, and it's my honor and my privilege to introduce a couple of our panelists tonight. And I will begin by introducing Ms. Sarah Perry. Ms. Perry is a certified dementia practitioner committed to helping families have the best possible quality of life throughout their journey with memory loss and cognitive decline. She is the executive director of Respite Care Charleston, a nonprofit providing support and services for those living with Alzheimer's disease and other types of dementia. Under Sarah's leadership, RCC has served hundreds of local families through support groups, caregiver consultations, half-day memory care services, and programs for individuals with mild cognitive impairment or early stage dementia. She is a frequent speaker sharing information on dementia, including risk factors, warning signs, and caregiver resources. And she is the proud mother of two. So, Ms. Perry, thank you for being with us, and we're glad to have you tonight. And we also welcome Mr. Don Bagwell, who is a resource coordinator and dementia consultant for Trident Area Agency on Aging. He is the only certified Alzheimer's educator in South Carolina with credentials from the National Certification Board of Alzheimer's Care. He is a caregiver for caregivers, so wonderful person to have on our discussion tonight. And he provides caregiver counseling and education about aging and dementia issues. His over 30 years of experience includes working with agitated dementia patients, research in helping develop Alzheimer's drugs, writing articles on dementia care, and being a frequent speaker at local and national dementia seminars. Don's professional interests include agitation in dementia, wandering, driving issues, and cultural concerns in aging. he also facilitates respite grants to give a break to caregivers. So, Mr. Bagwell, thank you again for being with us tonight. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you. And I have 2 grandkids too, so I got to put that in. If Sarah's going to tell about her kids, I'm going to tell that. So.
Oh, don't get me started, Don.
Oh boy. Well, we're delighted that we could pull you away from your families to be a part of this community tonight. Thank you both. Thank you again for sharing with us. And Ms. Perry, I'll just begin with you. Thank you again for being with us. And I'll just ask you, if you would, to just describe some of the things that you see in your area of expertise and just share with us from your perspective.
Well, the word expert always frightens me. Especially after hearing Don's bio, but I am definitely a professional when it comes to dementia care. I've been doing this a while, following my own family experiences with grandparents who had dementia. And the more people I work with who have Alzheimer's disease or other types of dementia, the more I realize that every person is truly unique. There are lots of commonalities and similarities between the symptoms and what individuals and families experience, but it varies just as much as our personalities can. So that means really every family's journey is unique. But what's pretty incredible is there's so many people in our community who are dealing with this condition, that there have become, we've developed this great network supporting one another along the way, which is fantastic to be a part of and to help facilitate. It's hard to know where to begin. So I work with Respite Care Charleston. We've been around for about 30 years, and our sole mission is just to help folks that are living with Alzheimer's and other forms of dementia. I'll give just the most basic overview of dementia versus Alzheimer's, because that's a very frequent, people don't necessarily understand that. The example I like to use is if I were sitting here sniffling and sneezing and watery eyes and coughing and runny nose, those were my symptoms. Those symptoms could be caused by any number of things: allergies, a cold, COVID, the flu, sinus infection. It goes on and on. Well, dementia is a group of symptoms that usually includes memory loss, and then a cognitive decline and loss of executive functioning, which can mean a whole lot of different things, again, to different people and based on what's causing that. The most common, just like, the flu could cause the symptoms I described, the most common cause of dementia is Alzheimer's disease, but it can be caused by other things. So we'll hear about, in professional sports, we hear about a lot, CTEs. That's one of the less common examples, but that can cause dementia. Strokes can cause dementia. Other types of diseases and conditions that will gradually cause the brain to deteriorate. There's lots of different causes. But for the most part, kind of the journey looks very similar. And a lot of the tools and techniques are going to be relevant across all these different causes of dementia. So that kind of gives you just the most basic overview. They estimate, I would guesstimate based on data that's a few years old and then some projections and whatnot, there's probably around 10,000 people just in Charleston County who are living with some form of dementia, whether or not it's diagnosed. A lot of folks never get diagnosed, which is unfortunate, but that's their choice and that's their reality, and that's okay. And about 4 out of 5 of those folks live at home. And so they are part of our community in ways that we don't realize. And a lot of times, it's the folks who withdraw from the community, withdraw from the church or the social organizations or even the neighborhood groups, anything like that. Those are oftentimes families who are facing dementia. it's because it's such a big burden, and it's hard to relate to for a lot of folks. They tend to just kind of want to stay home, and got a gentleman who tells me he's in one of our early stage support groups. He doesn't have to worry about messing up or loud noises or too many distractions and things when he's at home. So he just feels safer there, which is, that's his reality. I don't know where to go.
Sure.
The dementia journey, depending on the type, can vary greatly in the duration. I've known folks who are going on 17 plus years, and I've seen folks who've had a journey of just a few years. And there's so many factors that go into it. I find myself constantly saying, it depends. Maybe, but there's just, again, so many variables that make the journey different from person to person. But what we try to do is just meet every individual where they are. I mentioned in our mission, it's to support those living with dementia. Well, that can be the person who is the caregiver or the person who's diagnosed. And so we have services for both of those. I'm going to ramble for hours, and I don't want to do that. Did you have any specific questions, or where can I?
Sure. Well, I was very curious as you work with especially groups and the caregivers, are there common themes that you pick up on in either the group setting as some of the caregivers share about their experience and what it's like? And I just imagine that it like a lot of other things that people encounter, that these kinds of things that we go through can be isolating. And I'm wondering what kind of encouragement people might discover in some of those group settings.
So our organization, we host about 10 support groups a month. 10 support group meetings. They're all free. They're open to anybody, no obligation, no commitment. You speak as little or as much as you want. It's interesting what I usually hear from folks who will go to a meeting. A lot of folks are not comfortable in that setting, and so we try to support them in other ways. But what I hear very frequently is, wow, I'm not so alone after all. I hear a lot of, some folks have it so much worse than me, and I didn't realize. I tell folks it's not a competition. It's hard on everybody in different ways, and that's okay. The issues range, the challenges that they face range dramatically. Probably one of the most common I hear among folks who are in the later stages or the mid to late stages is it's just trying to get a break. How difficult it is, my husband won't let anybody come in the house to sit with him, so I can't go anywhere. Or my family will come, but they're only there for half an hour or an hour, and I need more time than that. Or it's just so expensive. The cost of care is cost prohibitive for many, many folks. And even if you can find somebody, oftentimes it's challenging, through an agency or something to find consistent help. And for someone with dementia, they're highly vulnerable. You want to have someone who they're able to build a relationship with and become comfortable with over time. So that's a huge challenge. We also, on the other hand, have groups of folks who are in the much earlier stages of the disease. And there we're talking about, how do I get them to go to the doctor in the first place? Or how do I manage, get them to stop driving? That is without a doubt one of the hardest challenges. I hear quite frequently, and I would imagine that some of the folks who are watching have experienced this, what we call show timers, where someone who has dementia or Alzheimer's disease can, for a short period of time and in a controlled setting, you have no idea that they have it. They can say the right superficial things, the very casual conversation, to where when you walk away from it, you don't know, do they really have it? And caregivers say, well, because my spouse or my parent can do that, people don't understand what it's really like at home 24/7 in the evenings, how hard it is to get them to bathe or to wear undergarments or, any number of challenges, which I think further isolates people. They feel even more, because they're right. People don't understand. So it's nice when we have these support group meetings and people come together and are able to share those similar frustrations and feelings and, offer suggestions for, dealing with the problem and dealing with the emotional side of things. You've got the practical side, you've got the emotional side, the financial side, the spiritual, the mental, the physical, you name it. It's really impacting every part of their lives. And so to see folks come together and really support one another it's incredible.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Ms. Perry. I'll begin to shift over to Mr. Bagwell in just a second. But as you mentioned, some of the emotional experiences that caregivers have caring for their loved one with dementia. I think about a spouse who shared one time that one of the most difficult things is as they were caring for their spouse, that was the only person who shared memories, the same memories over, I think it was about 60 years at that point, 60 years of living. And this was the only person in the world who had the exact same experiences in married life.
Yeah.
And so there was a grieving, even
Absolutely.
as they were caring for the person physically, there were in other ways as well, but there was a grieving process that they went through just because they couldn't share some of the same stories that they had experienced over a lifetime together. So yeah.
They often call it the long goodbye. And I think a big part of that is that you're grieving all along the way. Not only do you lose, like you described, the person that you share these memories with and these special experiences, but you're also losing the person who was your partner in the household, the person who maybe managed the finances of the home or managed the cooking. And so now all of a sudden you got to learn all this stuff and it's really challenging. And the person you would normally turn to support you with those challenges, they're not able to. And so you got that frustration. And as time goes on, you just lose a little bit more of that relationship. And that is devastating. And, we talk a lot about how that is grief, and it's okay to it's important to recognize it and to allow yourself to feel that and to experience that grief just as you would any other type.
Oh, wow. Well, thank you, Ms. Perry. You have led us off in a great way, just in sharing from your perspective. And I'm sure there will be questions and comments. I already see some coming in our chat function. So we will certainly get to those and hear more from you. But Mr. Bagwell, we turn to you now. And thank you again for being here. And obviously a lot of background that you bring to this conversation as well. So it sounds like a lot going on in your organization, and we're looking forward to hearing more about it.
Good. We'll be glad to share that a little bit later on. Sarah had some excellent points, and when you have someone not just with dementia, but sometimes just with chronic illnesses, Parkinson's, if they've had a stroke, ALS, all those kinds of things, there are those losses that you have. But Sarah mentioned something that I found very interesting. She was talking about people have to learn all these new skills. I had a dear friend I grew up with, and he called me one day and he said his dad had dementia and they just really didn't know what to do. And so I tried to help him. But in the course of that, I found out that his mother had never even written a check. Her husband had handled all the finances, had handled all the business dealings, all the checkbooks and everything. And all of a sudden, she was forced to learn that skill. She was forced to learn how to do new things. And so, I'm not going to say it's a great thing, but sometimes these kinds of challenges can present opportunities in disguise. Um, she learned so many new skills with her husband with dementia. Some skills you don't want to have to learn, but I was watching her over the course of several years, and it appeared that she was gaining more confidence in her own abilities, and I think that's very important to say. Um, these kinds of challenges are not easy. There's so many aspects of it. And I had this lady call me on the phone one day. She just started being a caregiver, and she said, "Oh, Mr. John, I need help." And I said, "What do you need help with?" And she said, "My husband has dimensions, Dimensions." And we kind of chuckled about it, but I got to thinking about it. When you have dementia, it does affect so many dimensions of your life, not just the physical decline of someone, but it also has to do with, you ask, why God? Why is this affecting my family? I've led a good life. He's done everything right. And all of a sudden, my husband has dementia. How fair is that? Well, it's not. Financial aspects. Some people are torn between having to continue to work and having to care full time for someone. And the problem with this whole illness is, at the very outset, it's learning by the seat of your pants. Sometimes I do this little presentation called "How to Prepare When You're Already There." You're just having to learn on the job. Fortunately, Sarah's group at Respite Care Charleston, with all their support groups and organizations like the ARC in Somerville, and the caregiver ministries like at Royal Baptist and Mount Moriah Missionary Baptist, all these different places, we're starting to realize that there are some real needs in the community. And I think Sarah, and Sarah didn't tell you this, but her program is nationally recognized. And it's been around a long time. And I have to give Sarah a really good plug for that, because they not only help a lot of families, but they help people continue to have fun. And Sarah and I have the same philosophy that if a person has spent their lives helping to build up the community, they really have a right to remain a part of that community. And it's up to churches, it's up to organizations like Respite Care Charleston, the ARC, and Trident Area Agency on Aging. It's up to all of us to try to find new ways to keep people in the community. There's no place like home. Now, sometimes it's very difficult for a person to remain at home, and there's a lot of guilt and a lot of decisions, but that's delegating care to get what's best for that person. But as long as possible, I think everybody wants to remain in their homes as long as possible. And we also have to recognize that not only is it a challenge for that for the caregiver, but it's also a big challenge for that person. They're going through a lot of changes. They're trying to stay independent, and that can lead to a lot of agitation. They're trying to stay in control. And sometimes they don't want to do things that may be in their best interest, because they don't really recognize, sometimes they don't have the insight and the judgment that they may need. But I will say I'm learning as I go in this field that it's really okay. And I want to be very clear, and I might have to say this a couple of times in our talk tonight. It's okay to sometimes ask the person with dementia to make some of those sacrifices. If you respect a person as a full member of your family, sometimes we have to make sacrifices. We may have to do things that are a little uncomfortable for us, but a lot of times we do adjust to that trepidation and those challenges. They may not want to go to daycare, but that may help keep the family going. They may not want to try out a new program like doing gardening activities at Respite Care Charleston. But it's okay to push a little bit and to try to keep that person engaged, but it's also okay to ask them to make a few sacrifices along the way too.
Well,
I could not agree more with you, Don. I think a lot of times folks will, regardless of whether it's dementia or any other condition, I think when people have limitations, there's sometimes a tendency to just discount them altogether. And
Right.
there is, folks have so much still to offer, and, they want to have a purpose and they want to contribute. And exactly like you say, we have to meet them where they are and give them those opportunities. They can't adapt like we can. So the onus is on us. And I think it's a moral obligation and an ethical, it's just all around. And I would add too, one of the groups that our organization works with is folks who have early stage dementia or even mild cognitive impairment. And these are folks who are aware of what's happening, and they're able to talk about it and to say, do I need to stop driving? Or what is it, what does it look like? Am I going to wind up in a facility or, any of these questions? And so seeing them come together and support one another as well is pretty incredible. They worry about being a burden. They feel terrible about, my wife has to sacrifice this, or my husband now has to do all the cooking, or, whatever the issue is. And they're experiencing it in their own way. Now, there are certainly a lot of folks who are not able to understand, their brains are not capable of processing the fact that they have this disease and how it's impacting them. But there's a whole lot of folks who get it, and they're, they're scared. One gentleman told me it's like there's confetti in his brain.
Confetti.
Another gentleman said, another gentleman said, dementia to him was like fog. And it wasn't always there. And sometimes it was just very light. And sometimes it was really thick. And you don't know when it's coming or going. And there's really nothing you can do about it. Mm-hmm. And I just, the visualization and the way he put that, I think helped me grow in my empathy as well.
So it's really important for us to honor people for who they've been, who they are right now, but also to respect them for who they're becoming. And I've been really kind of pleasantly surprised of the number of people with at least moderate dementia that are still in the workforce, and with the proper supports in certain areas, people are able to continue to be productive and happy and parts of the community and add a lot to it. And with the proper supports, they can still do that. The other thing that's really interesting, and I know Sarah sees this with the artistic and the gardening kind of aspects of her program and the music, for some reason, all of those tendencies to hold back are loosened, and sometimes people get very creative with their artistic talents. With their musical abilities, people can retain the remembering hymns for a long time. And it's always very interesting what people still have left that they can contribute to their church, to their family, to their community. And I think sometimes we not only limit ourselves and say, well, we can't do this, but sometimes we do this kind of crystal ball thinking. And that's a lot of what I do. I try to help caregivers not put limits on their family member. And that's crystal ball thinking. Well, my husband has never been interested in going to a program. he won't be happy. Well, how do you know unless you try it? And it also works well. Mama may dry up and wither away if she's going to a nursing facility. I have actually seen quite the opposite in most of the situations. Sometimes, as Sarah was talking about, she said that, how did you say it? That people, people feel like they're a burden. Sometimes it's paradoxic, but sometimes going into a facility as a full-time resident in long-term care, that person actually, oddly enough, feels like they have more independence. And I actually talked with a lady who was in a residential care setting, and she said, I know I'm not a burden on my family. I'm out here by myself now, and I'm functioning pretty good, and I get free meals too. So, there are different ways to think about things, and you never know until you try it. And people say, well, my loved one won't be successful in a nursing home, and I can't put that sentence on them. But the reality of it is, in most situations, when you make hard decisions with this illness, if it doesn't work, what do? You just back up and you try another route. And that's something that I think is very important for us to try to help caregivers in the community understand. Look at all the options, try the ones that seem to make sense. Sometimes they work out, sometimes they don't. If they don't work, you just back up and you try a new plan. Have a plan B, C, and D.
And get creative. Somebody's posted a question about how do you get them out of the house, kind of piggybacking on what we were talking about earlier. So we have a lot of folks who will come to our group because they believe that they are volunteering with us and they want to come and help take care of the old people, which is awesome. Oftentimes it's like, well, these people are 20 years younger than you. But you say it's going to take care of the old people, but giving them the opportunity to give back and to feel like they're supporting others, for a lot of folks, that gets them in the door, and that gives them a purpose and a meaning that's pretty incredible. Again, I keep using this word because it really is. I never cease to be amazed. We've got some folks who come to the group, they think they're working there. Some folks come, they think they're going to a brain class. There's a lot of different reasons that people will believe that they're coming. And oftentimes, going back to that feeling of being a burden, there are some folks who will say, well, my wife needs this time off. And so I come here and, I don't really need this, but it makes her feel better. And I just think the love that's there, you might not always remember her name, but that you love her and you want to look out for her and give her that time off. That's pretty cool.
And churches are a great place to start with getting people out of the house. Is something that they're used to doing. They may recognize a lot of the faces. Sometimes people have been going to different churches for many, many years. They recognize the music. And it's a real challenge, and we throw this challenge out to you guys in the community, in the spiritual community. Find opportunities for people with dementia to remain a part of your congregation. I can't tell you the number of caregivers who eventually develop some resentment and some bitterness because they have slid off that pew and gone out the door and nobody even noticed that they were gone. Sunday school superintendents, Sunday school teachers, and all of a sudden you look around and they're not there. That's when you go and knock on their door and you say, how can we keep you as a part of our community? Because churches are our communities too. And but it takes some intentional thinking about that and some intentional action on that part.
But you're right. It's a great opportunity to see the folks who may not have wanted to sing in the choir long ago, but now they want to, and they remember those songs, and it's a great opportunity to connect with them and for them to, again, to give back in their own way, or playing with children. That's something that's
All
just
right.
incredible to see. How often folks with dementia,
Mhm.
how they can interact with young children. And, you know, I don't ever like to compare an adult to a child. I don't want to be disrespectful. And I think that's a, you know, when we have like college students who come and volunteer with our program, I tell them, you know, you need to treat each person in this room like your professor. I mean, they need to be treated with that level of respect. But at the same time, the simplicity and the joy that they find in little things is, it's really sweet. And it's a special area where we wouldn't necessarily think to match people up. And yet it works. I had, a couple of years ago, we had a gentleman who had a type of dementia that often caused him to be very, he would get frustrated and irritable very easily. And when that happened, you know, he was anxious, he wanted to leave, he would just get real flustered. And at the time, my granddaughter was, you know, 6 months old. And she came one day to the program. My daughter brought her by for something. And Bob picked up the baby, and that was it. He was so calm. He was so happy. He doted on her. He loved her. He connected with her in just a very personal way. And I saw this side of him that I would have never known existed. So that was pretty cool. I could tell hours of stories like that, though.
Yeah. Well, you know, speaking of kids, allow your kids to be a part of this journey as you are a caregiver. Some of the best caregivers are young people and kids. We had a fellow that was involved with us in our program. His daughter said he got highly agitated and she needed a break, and we counseled her and helped her with all of that. But I went to visit them, and I met their 14-year-old grandson. And what I discovered was, I said, well, you know, when he does have these episodes of agitation and sundowning and irritability, you know, are you using medication? What kind of techniques are you using? And she said, well, Bobby. And Bobby was her son. And I said, well, what is that all about? And she told me that when her dad got very agitated, her son and the grandfather were both interested in New York Yankees and baseball. And so when he would see that happening, he would say, come on, Pops, let's go outside. I need you to teach me how to catch this baseball. And they would do that. And they would do that for hours and hours. And eventually he would calm down. And so, you know, think about all the resources that you have. And we're going to talk more about some of those hidden kind of resources a little bit later on. But the other thing that I do want to share before I forget, and there's so many things that we could talk about, but I do want to say that when we think of Alzheimer's, when we think of dementia, a lot of times we think of a person who is having a lot of memory problems. And it's true, people, you know, people often do have memory problems, but sometimes that's not the first symptom that is seen in dementia. Sometimes it's problems with reasoning. Sometimes it's problems with judgment and problems with insight. And, you know, early on in the illness, those may be the first kind of triggers that you see that alert you that, you know, something is not going as well as it should. And in certain types of dementia, like frontotemporal dementia, sometimes people don't have memory problems until later in the illness, but they will have problems with insight and judgment and reasoning. So you can't always reason with a person that has dementia, but you need to be aware that, you know, things are changing, and some of those problems with judgment could be some of the early red flags that may indicate that a person may be having some cognitive impairment.
Yeah. One thing I'll add to that, Don, that I always I do a lot of kind of coaching folks on how to communicate with someone with dementia, how to meet them where they are. If they say that, they used to do X, Y, Z and it's not true, don't correct them. There's no reason. We talk about a lot of those things and ways to approach challenges and deal with, if they're getting anxious or frustrated or emotional. And one thing that I think we don't always recognize on caregivers is that it's a totally one-sided change in communication style. And if you're talking about someone who is caring for their parent, I mean, you're now telling this individual, you need to change the way you've talked to your mom your entire life. And that's incredibly difficult, and mom can't make those adjustments. She can't, she's just not capable of understanding and rationalizing necessarily. And so it all falls on the caregiver. And I think that's just one burden that's often overlooked, is that not only is that person losing the ability to carry out some of the roles and functions that they have in the relationship before, but even just the most fundamental things have to shift. And that's just hard on the caregivers. And, it contributes to that just overwhelming exhaustion of every type.
Right. Sometimes we second guess ourselves and it just doesn't feel right to talk differently to your mom and your dad and your grandma, and even to your spouse in different ways. But it's hard to make decisions that you really don't want to make too. And there's a lot of guilt involved in taking those car keys and finding a new residence for people. But what I'm learning as I travel with people on this illness and with people in our own family, I'm learning that there is a positive function to guilt. It sounds really odd, but guilt is a mechanism to be a check and balance to make sure we're doing the right thing. It makes us stop long enough to be able to figure out, am I really making the right decision? And it makes you kind of think things through a little bit different and look at all the different scenarios. Now, you have to be careful you don't get caught up and paralyzed by that. But guilt can be a good check and balance, and it can actually steer you from making some bad decisions sometimes too.
Yeah,
I love that perspective, because there's an internal check and balance, but I love the fact that there are external resources that can help us navigate these different experiences, these different emotions that we're going through, and to hear someone say you're not by yourself. Right. Someone has traveled this road as well. And one of the themes, just one, I'm taking down good notes here, but one of the themes I'm picking up on is that as people deal with change, which will come, what are some of the, say, traditions, rituals, things that are important that have been important in that relationship over time? What are those things that we can hold on to and keep as we adjust to the changes that we're seeing? So I really do appreciate this discussion. I think part of caring for the caregiver is helping the caregiver understand just what is going on physically with this process. And I know, Don, that you have provided some slides for us that may help us understand that a little bit better. And whenever you're ready to share those, I think that would be helpful. But don't let me stop this conversation either, because I think it's wonderful to hear.
Yeah, we can keep talking. If there's a way just to put one slide up, that would be great. But just in time for dinner time, there is a picture of a brain up there, and I brought that as a way. Can we just, yeah, there you go. And I brought that just to kind of help us remember that this is a brain illness. They are not repeating themselves just to get on our very last nerve. But as you can see, there's a difference in these two types of brains. You know, the one on one side is larger, and that's because brain cells are dying. We really don't know what is going on, why those brain cells are exactly dying. But in the next slide, it does show that, you know, there is death of the neurons. Those aren't coming back. We haven't found a way to regenerate them, but there's these gunked up dead nerve cells and trash basically in the brain called plaques and tangles, and it just depends on where things are happening in our brains as to what's going to transpire with a person with dementia. And certain types of dementia affect certain areas more. But if you have a lot of damage on one side of the brain, on the side of the brain, they may have more trouble. You know, if they're having trouble with the speech center in the brain, they're going to have trouble communicating and understanding. If they have trouble with the part of the brain that controls balance and gait, they're going to have a lot of falls. So I just really want to point out that one of the main aspects is the physical aspect, and they're not always doing it to get on your nerves. You know, there are trillions of neurons in the brain, and they travel over 100 miles an hour with the communication in the brain. And there's so many different parts that control so many things, and we're still learning about all those different parts because we're fearfully and wonderfully made. And but sometimes we just have to recognize that it is a brain illness. And it's really important to understand that, because we won't blame that person for just doing that to agitate us. One of the things in the next slide about setting priorities, and I know Sarah spends a whole lot of time doing this too, but it's very important to learn how to set priorities to keep your sanity, and to make sure that life goes as well as it can, because there are so many aspects, not just with different things going on in the brain, but there's so many aspects of this illness that you can be quickly overwhelmed if you're not trying to set priorities. And I just named some of those priorities, but it helps if you can divide and conquer. Safety is always the first, because, you know, it doesn't help to have power of attorney and you know, all these other things and have people on medication if the person is not safe. You know, have all the weapons been removed from the home? Is the person still driving? Is it safe for them to drive? You know, are they wandering out at night? You know, that's a really serious community issue with this illness, wandering. But, you know, we need to learn that safety is the first priority. You know, then there are things like physical conditions, you know, try to get to the root of some of the symptoms and treat some of the causes, and try to find out, you know, if this actually is something that is not treatable, or if it is something that, you know, quite possibly can be treated, like thyroid problems, vitamin deficiencies. You know, sometimes older people's bodies change, and they may look very confused because of the delirium, because they have a urinary tract infection, when we think it might be a dementia starting or getting worse. Sometimes it could be because older people have bodies that are getting slower, and the medication that they've always been on for 20 and 30 years is starting to build up in their system and stay there longer. So, you know, we need to look at those kinds of things. You know, there's legal implications that can save you from headaches down the road. You know, getting power of attorney early, making sure that person is, being respected, and including that person as early as possible in helping to make decisions about what they want to happen in their life as their illness progresses. Financial issues, trying to figure out how you're going to pay for everything. And that's even before trying to figure out what's the best housing situation. Am I able to stay at home and care for this person, or are we going to have to rely on, Medicaid beds and long-term care? And I've got it listed there last, but caring for yourself. Sometimes we put ourselves at the very end, and you don't always have to do that. It's not always a good decision to always err in favor of that person. Sometimes it's okay for you to take a little bit of precedence in addressing your own needs. And so I think that's really one important thing. The other thing in the next slide is I found out that, and in my own case, we're taught to be very self-sufficient in this country, and we value independence and a can-do spirit and all of that. And that makes it especially difficult to be able to ask for help. One of the reasons why caregivers are having difficulty is because they never learned the art of asking for help. So what I recommend is making a list of all the possible things that you're going to need help with, or the possible things that need to be addressed as you're a caregiver and as this person progresses with the dementia. Make that list and check it twice, and then look at it and divide it into two kind of areas. What are those things that you can do for yourself, do by yourself? You'd be surprised at the things that you can do and can learn to do with the proper training and the proper help on learning how to do things yourself. You can do it an awful lot, but there are certain things like legal advice and medical advice that you really have to learn how to rely on professionals. What I hear a lot of times, and I know Sarah's heard this a lot, and we hear it anytime anybody's sick or is having difficulty, all your friends and family, they'll come up, and especially in church folks are really good about this. They'll come up, and they'll pat you on the back, and they'll look at you longingly in your eyes, and they'll say, let me know what I can do to help. And that's the last you ever hear of it. So what I recommend is, and the South Carolina Respite Coalition, they came up with this little nice little thing, and it's a list. It's called What I Need Done and Who Can Do It. And you keep that in the back of your pocket, and when somebody says that, let me know what I can do to help. Well, you whip that list out and you say, well, as a matter of fact, if you could come over and just sit for half an hour while I go and pay the water bill, that would really help me out. And sometimes it works on the other end too. If you're a good church member and you see a church member that's struggling as a caregiver, sometimes you don't even ask, you just show up to do the help. Ask what you can do for yourself. Be able to actually accept those offers of assistance. Now, they're not going to do it as good as you're going to do it, and in the way that you feel like you want it done or your care receiver needs it done. But sometimes you just have to accept good enough and keep moving. And then once they do that help, really show some genuine appreciation. Say, it really meant a lot to me. I was able to take a nap while you were here, and that helped me recharge my batteries. So, show your appreciation when people actually do help. And if you have a family member that's struggling, step up and do it. But it's really important to be able to accept those offers, because here's what I'm learning as I'm traveling with people is it's very, very hard for your church friends, for your family, for your friends to just stand on the sidelines and watch you decline as much as the person. It's very therapeutic for you to be able to give up enough of that control and let somebody actually minister to you, because it not only sends them a message is practical help, but it also sends a message that we are there for you and we want you to remain a part of our community.
I'll add to that. I know when somebody calls me and says, hey, would you help out with this? I know you're good at this or whatever. That makes me feel good. It makes me feel good to help somebody when they've asked for it. And so I try to look at it now as like, don't steal that opportunity from somebody.
Right.
People want to help. They're saying, what can I do for you? Because they want to help. They just don't know what it is. So you're exactly right. By giving them something specific, you're giving them the opportunity to have that good feeling of knowing they help someone they care about.
Right. I have this saying that I try to use and administer daily is see the need, fill it. And sometimes if you allow a person to help you do a thing that you've suggested, sometimes that can kind of trigger them into looking closer at your situation and how your life is going. And it can kind of prompt them to start paying more attention and being more intentional about helping you and about helping other people. Sometimes, our friends can help. Sometimes we have to look out in the community. And I've got another slide coming up next. It's called Rope in Those Resources. If you use those community resources that are out there, we don't always know about things until we actually are in need and have to start looking for them. So, churches and organizations and friends can really help steer you to those resources that you need. And I want to talk about just very briefly, and I don't want to monopolize the whole thing because Sarah has so many good things to say, and Miss T.C. Kennedy, Miss Jones Kennedy is here, and she's going to tell you a lot of hands-on kind of stuff. But there are some resources out there that are in the community. We try to be caregivers of caregivers out in the community. We have a lot of different things. If you don't know where to turn to get some help, just call our office at Trident Area Agency on Aging. If you go back, I'll tell you a few of the things. Information and referral. We have an excellent helper in Lavanya Graham. She's our information and referral person. And if we don't have it, she can know who can help you out. We have a family caregiver support program, Alzheimer's support services. We've added an opportunity for people to get professional counseling with licensed professional counselors. If you find that you're suffering from depression or anxiety or just those changes and the grief that's involved, we have that available too. If you're having trouble with Medicare or signing up for Medicaid, we have a dedicated people in our office to help with answering Social Security questions and Medicare questions. When you're stuck on that line with Social Security and Medicare and you can't seem to get through, you can actually call our office and Angela Edwards can answer a lot of those questions. If your loved one is trying to remain independent but needs some assistance, there's home care that helps people with bathing and dressing and personal care. We have home delivered meals that people may qualify for. If your loved one is in a nursing facility or a residential care program and they're having some difficulty, we have the long-term care ombudsman in our office. Other things in the community. Next slide is under Medicaid. There's community long-term care. It helps with either care at home, or they can go to adult daycare. Medicaid assistance helps with like personal care in the home, incontinence supplies, and even nursing home transition. They're there. But and I didn't mention an important part of our program. Go back to that other slide. Is we do have a respite care program, and we can help people afford to go to programs like Respite Care Charleston, adult daycare, or have somebody come into the home. There's programs for veterans that are out there. Aid and Attendance is a great program. And I'm very happy to see that if you're a veteran, the Ralph Johnson VA has some excellent people over there in their social work department. They're helping people sign up for a monthly stipend called Aid and Attendance that can help a veteran that meets the criteria. They can help the veteran's spouse sometimes with a monthly stipend to help with care. So then there are a lot of other things like educational programs in the community. You can call either me or Sarah can hook you up with their educational programs. We work with people one-to-one in groups. And many opportunities like Powerful Tools for Caregivers, Dementia Dialogues, just a number of different one-to-one programs too that, we can help you learn how to cope a little bit better. Involve your family physician, the pharmacist, geropsychiatrists are good to help with agitation. Then there's informal helpers, hidden helpers like the pharmacist. On another slide there, it's talking about private social workers. Sometimes people are having difficulty with family dynamics. That's important too. And people can sometimes benefit from having a referee who is trained and can help focus on what is needed in the family. And so sometimes a mediator is good to help get through the family stresses that are out there. Speech pathologists, if people are having swallowing problems, I'm just trying to help you learn to help us all learn to think outside the box. Call on your clergy at reasonable hours during office hours. I'll put that in for Reverend Harris. Let them know, what kinds of things you need on a spiritual level. And why would I have shoe salesmen down there? You ever thought about that? Your shoe salesman may be one of the most important people that you run into as you're coping with this illness. What is the reason? A lot of times people have problems with gait instability, balance problems, and sometimes just the right shoe will help. And it sounds kind of funny, but I put that up there just to help us think outside the box that, there are more people that can help if we really kind of look at everybody in the community to kind of help us out. So there's a couple of really good Facebook groups that we got to put in a plug. Sarah started a really good group through Respite Care Charleston. It's called Charleston SC Alzheimer's and Dementia Support. That's a Facebook page. There's also a really good Facebook page with over 10,000 people from around the country and around the world, and it's called Memory People on Facebook. And you can put in a question at any hour of the day or night, and you'll get an answer. But sometimes people feel isolated. Sometimes Facebook groups and Zoom sessions like this, we have to look at all the resources that may possibly be available. And I know I threw a whole lot of stuff at you. You're more than welcome to contact either me or people at other agencies. It does help if you have an idea of what exactly that you're in need of. You really have to be able to articulate those needs because we can have a more definite conversation and get the help that you need if you're able to say, you know, I'm exhausted, I need a break, or my loved one is not eating well, they need home delivered meals. That way we can very swiftly get you to the help that you need. It's not always at my agency. It's not always at other agencies, but generally the aging community and the dementia care community is small enough that we can get you to the people that can possibly answer your questions and possibly help you with some tangible resources to make your life a little bit easier. And that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So,
Well, Don, that's a great segue, and thank you for all of those resources. And I will give a shout out because I was also a shoe salesman in my prior life.
oh, okay. Well, there you go. You're all set.
There you go. Thank you for reminding us that there are so many resources in the community. And speaking of sticking to our story, I'm so grateful that we have Miss Letitia Kennedy, who is going to tell us about her story and her journey. And I will just introduce her. Miss Kennedy, who is known to most as TC, has been married to Michael Kennedy for 14 years, and she has been her husband's caregiver for the last 8 years. She is a native Charlestonian, and in addition to being a caretaker, Letitia is also a full-time soul food caterer who has made several appearances on the Food Network with her granddaughter on the show, Delicious Miss Brown. She has 3 children and 3 grandchildren, and she is a member of Jerusalem Baptist Church in Charleston, where the Reverend Herbert Beard is her and the pastor. So, TC, grateful that you're with us, and thank you for giving us your time and sharing your story with us. So I will just let you take it away and share your journey in your own way. Let's see. It looks like you're still on mute if you have a way of unmuting yourself.
Okay, can you
There
hear
we
me now?
go. We got you, yes.
There you go.
I don't know what's going on with the 2 pictures here, but however. Well, first of all, let me just apologize. I had a situation going on here. And then on top of that, I got a terrible cough that's going on. But however, we're going to do what we got to do. So yes, I've been married to Michael, and he's had Alzheimer's. Actually, my husband got diagnosed. I'm going to kind of prop my phone up here. My husband got diagnosed actually in 2015. So he was 56 years old. And so a lot of people always ask me, how did you know? How could you tell? My thing is, I pay attention to everything. I pay attention to everything when it came down to my children, and I pay attention to everything when it comes down to my husband. So I would notice that when I would ask him to do certain things, he would always forget. And so one day I asked him, I said, can you go? I was trying to deliver bottled water to some of the seniors in my neighborhood because there was a storm coming up. And I said to him, well, can you put the water in the car and I can go deliver the water? He put 2 basins in the car. So I said, okay. And I said, no, we need to put the water in the car. So I decided, I said, you know what? I said, we've been doing this for a minute. And I said, I think I'm going to make an appointment with the primary care doctor just to kind of have you tested to see what's going on. And so he was like, well, ain't nothing going on. He would always call it old timers. No, baby, it's Alzheimer's. So I took him to the primary care. Of course, they tested him. And he said, I believe that he does have dementia, but he's going to have to go to a neurologist. We took him to the neurologist, and it was August of 2015 when I took him there. And the neurologist said, well, he has dementia. And I said, okay, just still trying to get all this in. And I said, okay. And I said, well, what do I need to do? And he said, well, the first thing you want to do is stop him from driving. So I said, okay. Now in my mind, I'm thinking, well, he drives pretty good. He's doing pretty good. And at the time I was working for the VA, and And I knew this was God's way of speaking to me, because even though the doctor had said to me to stop him from driving, I continued to still let my husband drive. And one day I had a police officer called on my phone line, and he was asking me about a patient, if the patient had an appointment. And I said, yeah, the patient has an appointment at 8 o'clock. I said, but the patient hadn't checked in yet. Well, do you know where the patient is? And I said, no. I said, maybe the patient is probably on their way to the VA. Well, where's his appointment? I said, Charleston, VA, like that. And he said, well, ma'am, I need to let you know that your patient is in Virginia. And I said, what happened? He said, I believe he has dementia. So I said, okay. So I pulled up his records and everything, and I saw where the patient does have dementia. So I called the wife and I said, ma'am, I said, did your husband have an appointment this morning at the VA? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, your husband is in Virginia. And she said, Virginia. And I said, yeah. I said, let me ask you something. I said, does your husband have dementia? And then she said, yes. I said, were you okay allowing him to go to the hospital to his appointment alone? She said, yeah, well, he does it all the time. And I said, well, ma'am, he's already driven to Virginia because he said he has an appointment in Tennessee. And she was just screaming and hollering. I knew right then. I said, God, you're trying to tell me something. I came home from work and I said, you can't drive anymore. And he said, why? I said, you just can't drive. I said, because you may forget. And so we stopped driving, we stopped working. And then to be honest, for a minute, I got kind of scared, because like I'm saying now, how am I going to do this? How am I going to handle this? Who am I going to talk to? And everything I keep praying and asking the Holy Spirit to guide me. I said, Lord, you are my guide. You're my teacher. I need you to help me and walk me through this. What do I need to do? Well, somebody had told me about Respicare, and it was at a church on Bees Ferry Road. Well, when me and Sarah was talking the other day, she was like, yeah, I'm Respicare. Yeah. And she knew all about it. And I was like, isn't this something? So Mike started off at Respicare at the church for 2 hours a day. And then he went there, that church, 2 days a week. And then he went to another church in North Charleston in Park Circle for another 2 days for 2 hours a day. So it worked out good, because I decided that I was going to leave my job at the VA. And I did, because I wanted to basically take care of my husband. So while he was basically still a little in his right mind, he said to me, he said, are you going to keep me at home, or are you going to put me in a home? And I said, no, I want to keep you at home and take care of you. And I said, why did you ask me that? He said, because I don't want you to struggle with me. I said, I'm not going to struggle with you. And as time went on, it literally got harder and harder. And I thought, after getting him into active day, I said, well, maybe I'll just go back to work. So then I went back to work and worked for MUSC. And when I went back to work for MUSC, I stayed there. I actually went to MUSC and I said, I'm going to work here for 2 years. And they said, why 2 years? I said, I don't know. I just feel like I'm just going to work here for 2 years. One day I got home and there was a sweater lying across the chair. And Mike came home from active day. My neighbor would bring him in the house and he would just stay there until I get off. And he had the sweater on like it was a straight jacket. And I started crying and I was like, oh my God. I said, I can't do this. I said, I can't do this. So I started working from home. And then I called my girlfriend and I said, listen, I used to work for her for 4 years running a daycare. And I said, do you know of anybody that's really trustworthy that I can have them to come and sit in with Mike once he gets out of active day? And then she said that she could do it. Well, she did. When I tell you, she was the biggest help, and she worked with Alzheimer's patient. But this past April, she passed away. So now I have my niece, who now works for Always Care, who became the sitter. For the first 6 years that Mike had Alzheimer's, I did not take vacation. I did not go anywhere. I went to church and everything. And I said, God, I say, I don't really know what to do. So the first thing when I really found out more about the Alzheimer's, I started to read up on it. I said, okay, get knowledge and understanding about this because that's what you're going to need. So I pulled up and I realized that there are now 7 stages of Alzheimer's. So as I read through it, I took her to the doctor, the neurologist, and I said, I read up on it. So every time I would go to the doctor and I would tell him something, he would say, well, maybe you need to be the doctor because you know a lot. And I said, no, I said, I've learned to read. Reading is fundamental. So I've learned to read up on a whole lot of stuff. And I said, because it's the only way I'm going to know. And I said, so I would talk to my doctor about certain things. And then I started talking to my doctor because one morning I got up and Mike was outside. And I said, what are you doing out here? So I'm putting the trash out. I said, the trash man doesn't come today. So I had somebody to come to my house and put locks on my door. And he didn't have keys to the house. Excuse me. I took all the keys away. I hid all the keys. He was never the type of person that would say, go to the stove and cook and all that stuff, because he can't cook anyway. So he was never that type of person to do anything like that. He was a person, he was a workaholic, but he loved working in the yard and cutting the grass and stuff. And I still allow him to do that, even though it looked like a bad haircut, but I still like, oh my goodness, you did so good, you know, and I praised him for it and everything. But as time went on, I noticed the part that really hurt me the most is when I saw him really losing weight. And that really hurt. And I was like, okay, we got all these clothes that are size 38, 36, 34. None of these clothes could fit you or anything. And one day I just happened to look at him and I noticed that he was very framed and small. And one thing I never did was allow him to see me cry. I never did that. I live right down the street from the Citadel Mall. I got in my car and I drove to the mall and I up the windows and I yell and I scream and I yell and I scream. And I came back home like nothing was wrong because I knew at that time I needed to get it out. I was getting frustrated. I really was. I was getting frustrated. There were times when I said, I just don't want to be a caregiver. I just don't want to do this. You know, I don't want to do this anymore. And there were times when he got frustrated. And I think he got frustrated because I got frustrated. So now, okay, we got to change patterns. We got to do things different. TC, you cannot get frustrated in front of him because it's going to make him angry. It's going to make him say things or whatever. And if he say things, because sometimes they say things, they don't really mean it because they don't know what they're saying, but they say things and it hurts your feelings, you know, and you got to swallow it. You know, you just have to swallow it. And so, but thank God, God placed some of the best people in my life through this journey. I hear a lot of people say, well, they don't have the help or whatever, and help is out there. But however, I didn't really have to go or to call certain things or call Alzheimer's Association or anything like that. God just literally blessed me with help. When I was in Royal, I had people would come up to me. And it was so funny when I was laughing when Dawn said, just let me know what I could do. And you never hear from them again. And it's the truth, because you do not hear from those people again. But there are some people that would just literally come by. They would bring things, they would bring money, they would bring food. They would, well, I could sit if you got to run to the store and stuff like that. And I was like, God, I said, I just so appreciate that, because that's the time when you really need someone, you know. And so when my sitter, who's now, she's actually my niece, when she started working for me, and like I said, it's been 6 years, then I started traveling. I started having a break away from the house. I started, as a matter of fact, it was just Monday, I came back from a week's cruise, you know, went to Aruba a few weeks before that. And I've just been doing some traveling. And I said, you know what, as long as I know that everything is safe in my house, and all the alarms are on and everything. And then on top of that now, I have a son who is mentally challenged that lives here with me as well. So not only am I dealing with my husband, I am dealing with my son as well. But the thing about it, what is so great about it, is that my son, he works and everything, but he helps me with my husband. In the morning time, I'm up trying to get Mike in the car. We have the hardest time to get him in the car to go to active day, and my son have to come up. We literally have to almost pick his feet, one of his foot up to get him in the car, because he's stiff and he's stubborn. He doesn't want to get in the car. So it's kind of hard there. I got a little arthritis in my lower back, so it's a little hard for me to kind of to do all that stuff. But you know what? I remember as plain as day when the Holy Spirit said he was going to take care of me. And I know I talk to people about God a lot because that's all I know. That is all I know. All I know is that God is going to help me. And so that's all I rely on, is that what God is going to do for us and what he has been doing. And so it hurt when I had to leave my husband a couple of years ago for 2 months, because I had to go and take care of my father, who eventually passed away. So I lived in Jersey during the week, and I would come home on the weekend to iron up my husband's clothes for the whole week, cook for my husband and my son for the whole week. And then on Monday, I would fly and go back out to Jersey. And I did that for a couple of months until my father passed away. That was hard. It's hard even when I go on vacation, because if I can't see my husband on the camera, it saddens me, because it's not that I think that he's being mistreated. I'm so used to being around him. It's just that overwhelming love. And so when I asked God before, I said, how am I going to do this? How am I going to treat it? And I'm up like 3-4 o'clock in the morning, because it is my best time to talk to God. So I said, how am I doing? The Holy Spirit said to me, treat him like you would like you treated your children. And I was like, well, God, you don't want me to do that. I said, because I was one of those overprotective moms. I was the mom that the kids didn't go spend the night out to their friend's house and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, every little thing that I think that needs attention to is what I do when it comes down to him. I try my best to give him the best attention. No, even at this point, I do not want to put my husband in a home. I don't want to, I really don't. I don't want to put him in a home, because I feel like he'll wither away, And I've always believed when people talk about dying alone, of course, we're gonna leave here. We're all going to come to that point in time, but dying alone to me is that when you don't have your family around you and you just wither away. And I want us to always be with him and be around him. If we have so much fun in here, like today, my husband couldn't stop laughing. You know why? Because he was standing up looking at himself in the mirror. And he saw, and he kept pointing at himself in the mirror. And I said, you know who that is? And he said, yeah. And he just laughed and laughed and laughed and laughed. And that made me feel so good that there were no sadness there, that he saw himself. Yeah. And so I people, like when I take him to the daycare, they'll say, why does Mr. Kennedy come dress up every day? I say, he's not dressed up, but that's how he used to dress. That's what I want to do.
Sister TC, can I just share something that I hear you throughout this conversation? One of the themes I'm picking up on is the importance and the power of identity. Who we know ourselves to be, but also who others around us know us to be, right. And how they honor that. And just that glimpse you gave us of your husband looking at himself in the mirror and recognizing joy, and you honoring that, you recognizing that and participating in that moment with him. So I just appreciate that, and I just want to share what I see and share what I hear, because I know others are hearing the same thing, and I believe it's a blessing to them as well. And so I just want to offer this time. I know there's so much, and I want to thank Don and Sarah for just answering the questions in the chat and responding to those inquiries. And certainly, if there are more questions, you have the contact information. But as we begin to wrap up our time tonight, I just want to offer the opportunity for each of you to give us a takeaway. If there's one thing you would want, and I know there's more than one, but if there's something that you would want the audience to take away with them from this conversation, I'm wondering what that might be. And Ms. TC, I will just start with you. What is something that you have learned on this journey that you can offer to someone else? If you could speak to your former self 14 years ago and say, I want to encourage you and I want to share this, what would that be? Because
Patience.
maybe patience. Okay.
Patience.
I
I absolutely did not have patience in the beginning. And I'm going to be honest, I did not have patience because I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I put myself into. But as I journey on, I know now that it takes patience to do what you do.
Wow. Well, we certainly thank you. Thank you for sharing your journey. And that's a blessing for us to hear. And I look at your smile and I see the joy. I see the love. So thank you. Thank you for offering that to us. And Sarah, I would ask you the same thing. If there is a takeaway, if there's something you would want our audience to hold on to from this evening. And I believe you're on mute because we want to hear this. So.
I said I have a whole lot of things, but I'll try to narrow it down. One thing that I think is really important, and I applaud TC. I'm a little bit jealous of all your travels because good for you. But I really applaud you for having having such a healthy attitude towards caring for yourself. It's hard, but caregivers have to be the number one patient in the family. Your physical and mental and emotional, spiritual, your well-being has to come first. And it's so easy to say, on the airplanes, they say, put on your oxygen mask first and things like that. But there's actually a significant percentage of caregivers who pass away before their loved ones. And I have seen that happen with some of the families that we work with. And so, to make sure that is, you follow TC's example to the extent that you can. Two, have a backup plan because goodness, like I said, I've seen caregivers who wound up in the hospital unexpectedly, and you don't have a plan beyond a few hours here or there, or you think, well, I guess my son or daughter will step in, or, my brother or sister, whoever. That's way easier said than done. Way easier said than done. And I've got a list that we've kind of put together of a lot of different considerations that you just want to kind of map out, and even how to make that file and that list as convenient as possible for others to find. And I think the last thing I would say, there were a couple of folks who have asked about, the cost and things associated with care. It can be really cost prohibitive. I will tell you one thing I'm very proud of is our organization is committed. We will not turn anyone away over money. A lot of what we do is free. Support groups are free. If you call me and you've got a question about, this legal situation or how do I deal with this situation, there's no cost for that at all. So do it, and then even our day programs that we offer, we'll do a scholarship. Everybody needs respite. Every caregiver needs time off, and we will make that happen. So, please don't hesitate. And I'll tell you, I refer folks to Don quite frequently and to that agency in general. It's a tremendous resource. We're here. And truly, I mean, like I said earlier, it genuinely brings me joy to help others. And so please call. There's nothing to lose in reaching out.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. And Don, any takeaways that you would like to bring to us today?
Well, I'm just ecstatic that Royal has really stepped up and brought this communication out into the whole community. Sometimes when people are caregivers, they really feel like they're just putting their life on hold. But I want you to try to turn it around and think about it, what you're doing in a totally different way. This is a season of your life and it's a great calling.
Mhm.
This is a calling that not everybody gets to do. I mean, sometimes spouses make those vows for better or for worse, in sickness and in health.
Come on now.
You can't, there's no quicker way to show your love than to the sacrifices that you're making as a caregiver. There is no higher calling. And as a preacher's kid, I'm going to close my part out with a scripture that I think is very appropriate. Preachers' kids do pay attention on those church pews sometimes too.
I
And
hope so.
I'm going
hope
to
so.
close with giving you something to think about from the book of John, chapter 19 and verse 26. Pastor, you know that? You know what that is? I'm going to tell you. The preacher's kid gets to tell the preacher. It said, Jesus was on the cross, and when Jesus therefore saw his mother and the disciple standing by, whom he loved, he saith unto his mother, what did he say? Woman, behold thy son.
Mm.
And then saith he to the disciple, behold thy mother. And from that hour, that disciple took her unto his own home. Jesus, in that one of his final acts on earth, Jesus was arranging care as a caregiver. He was making sure that his mama was being taken care of. So I'm just going to leave you with that. Amen.
Yeah.
Wow. 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 I can't think of a better way to put it. And isn't it wonderful to know that there are wonderful folks in the community who can just, create that safety environment, places that we can turn to when we have questions, when there are concerns. So thank you for making all of these resources known, especially when we can pick up the phone and say, I know that person. I know the person who I may be speaking to on the other line. So just thank you for sharing tonight. Don, Sarah, TC, we're so grateful for your words and for your insight tonight. I am grateful for Sister Cleo Brown. You can't see her, but she makes this thing happen. And so also for Sister Nairobi Orr, we certainly wouldn't be here without her help. So just thank you for the technical support and just the leadership and guidance that we get from our chairperson and her committee. So grateful to once again be able to have this opportunity. Blessings to everyone and certainly our gratitude. So Don closes out in a great way with scripture text. And so as we open tonight, why don't we again give thanks as we close together in prayer. So eternal God, I thank you. I thank you for the gift of identity. I thank you, Lord, that you know us. You know us. And I thank you that we sometimes discover a deeper sense of identity as we care for others. Even when the journey is difficult, there are deeper dimensions that we discover because we love and because we care and because we have compassion. Thank you that no one has to feel like they're alone or isolated, but thank you that there are partners in the community and they're partners very close, sometimes even within our own household or within our own church community or a next door neighbor that we can reach out to. We pray that either we would continue to support others directly or perhaps indirectly as we rally around the caregivers and give them the encouragement and support that we're able to offer. Help us to be even more sensitive to need as we've had this discussion. And thank you that you are so sensitive and so caring for the needs that we have. You know all and you see all. And we thank you that you know and see us. Bless us and we give thanks. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All
Amen.
right.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you all do and thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you
Truly
for inviting